of Liberty on the YouTube, and that's part 1. And that was the mysteries of Egypt, and we really...
January 5th, sorry.
Oh, January 5th.
Yeah, here we are.
There. Oh, it's January 5th. Changed my date. I don't know what I did. Okay. Anyway, but I did that probably a month ago, and I was shocked. Within a week, there was like 1,000, and I looked at it yesterday, and there's
8,600.
8,600. Shocking, right? Because we have a small group. But because, and so I'm going to go through this. There's a lot to cover, and I could take a whole section of this and do another because there's so much. But I'm going to go through it pretty quickly. So save your questions for the end, and there will be a lot.
Just one more. I was going to say,
yes.
There's a lot of people that have asked more questions that I think you could answer. And so if you're looking on, if you just go out there and look at it, at the feed,
okay.
There's some great questions.
Okay, I would like
and
to.
So that will help you prepare for your next one.
Okay, thank you, Mike. All right. Okay, so this is part 2 of that. Okay, so here we go. All right, part 1, the mysteries of Egypt, forbidden knowledge, lost wisdom, has a lot to do with the woman, and that how we found her, and she was still in Egypt, and we can find her on the walls and a lot of their theology. So the part 1 gave us the purpose of the Egyptian temples, and that was how do you become godlike, right? How do you go and become more in keeping with our Heavenly Father. And where the information for the temples came from, we talked about how Enoch had that information. Enoch gave it to Noah. Noah has a group that come back, and those Okdad, those 4 couples, 8 people, become this group, and they aren't necessarily their gods, but they are these keepers of sacred wisdom, and so they honor them as sons and daughters of God. So they're just keepers of that high level of knowledge that all of a sudden bursts upon the scene in Egypt, right? They have all this incredible knowledge. And so we also found that the information on the women's role was kept within Egypt. You don't find it when you get to later on into the Jerusalem temples. The woman seems to be gone. And the power gained when we put the woman back into the temple, or we understand her role and the theology that goes with it. So to awaken to a higher God consciousness, the woman has a part to play in that. And that's what I think we want to recapture. Now, part 2 is the purpose of the Egyptian tombs. Now, the tombs we think of as a place to bury our dead, but their tombs were more like launching pads. Transcend, and you go into the hereafter, and they were very specific. Those tombs were so highly decorated with paintings and imagery, and they were just teaching you the entire time. So it's not like they just dug a hole and put in a casket with a dead mummy. No, it's artwork and symbolism to the max. So how to pass by the gates, we'll go see that, and the guardians, and the exit this realm and return back to the mansions of God. Then the third part I'll cover is the bloodline of Joseph. This becomes really important because we lose Joseph, right? After Moses, like, where'd he go? This was the 11th son of Jacob, whose name gets changed to Israel, and he was the one with the great blessing. Where'd he go? How come we don't know anything about Joseph? They always say Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and those are the ones you look at, but where's Joseph? The great seer, visionary, we'll see what happens there. Okay, so this really takes us to the purpose of life. Why am I here? What's my purpose? Where am I going? Well, that was explained in the Egyptian temples. These temples, the pyramids, and their tombs. So in the temple, it gave us an outline. We saw a physical outline of how you go from the outer world, into the courtyard, into the garden, into the holy place. And this was an initiation for your mind, for your soul, for your spirit to understand this progression that we are here on a testing land in this world, but the progression that we can make in this world towards our goal. Where am I going? What am I trying to do? And Enoch was the great teacher of this. In Egypt, his name was Tot. And so he was the scribe, and he left a record. He left the writing. And this scribe, they say, it's probably he did not inscribe on the inside of the temples the actual words, but those were given, and it was written in stone. So we'll see the most ancient religious text ever found, ever recorded, is in the pyramid and inside the pyramid. And we'll find it and to understand it. So we will find that there are tomb doors. There are real things passing through these veils, these gates, these doors back into the presence of God. Temples are structures of return. And Jacob, Jacob, remember, he had the dream about the ladder, Jacob's ladder, and how to return back into the presence of God. So he used a structure in a story of the ladder, and each rung represents something with God or the Spirit of God to be allowed to know his name. Names become important. There's a process of doing this. So in Lehi's dream, he used the imagery of going on a journey and with a rod and having to go back and find that tree of life where that light came through that tree, and that we want to partake of the fruit of that tree. So here we see the temple symbolism on the left showing the progression to God compared to Lehi's dream on the right. In this one, you can see the very front where it has the two, this is like cut in half, right? So the midline of that is always open. And on the holiest of days, they would even open the veils or the doors that went into the holy place and the Holy of Holies. It faces due east. And so when the sun would rise on that the spring equinox, the sun would go all the way through into the Holy of Holies and illuminate. So it was a conception motif, the temple being the house of God, and then the light coming into that house for illumination. Our whole purpose is to of the Lord. And a lot of times in other cultures, they would literally use a mountain and a dip and a mountain due east. And when the sun rose right between there, it's a marker not only for seasons and times and planting of food, but it's a season of the new year. So that was a season of the new year, the conception, the birth, and the beginning of, this cycle. On the right, we see the tree of life. You can see the outliers are the great cities. That's just worried about this world, right? They're just worried about what we're going to do here. But there's a separation between that waters, and those that wanted to get on that trail. Imagine that the midline of the temple would be the midline of that rod. And you're going from the outside area into the holy place, the Holy of Holies, where the tree of life was. They literally had a tree of life also in the Egyptian temple. It was considered the sacred sycamore, or the tree, it was a fig tree, sycomore, right? It had the figs. Why in Adam and Eve they used the figs. They wanted to get back to that tree of life. All right, temples are for the living to progress. Tombs are for the souls of the dead to progress. So here you can see the tree representing, and when there's the woman standing in the middle of the tree, you see to the right, that's Thoth, or he's the bird head, right? He's represented as a bird, and Egyptian symbolism is that the bird has the ability to fly to the heavens and communicate with the gods, and they bring back that information. So the person sitting in that chair is having their name, you can see the scribe on the far side, written on a leaf. The leaf of the tree represented like the book of life. You are now an elect soul. Your name has been written on the book, in the book. And you can see also Thoth over here, which is representing, right? These are mask kind of things. But he's probably a priest in the temple representing Enoch. And Enoch is the one that tells you how do you get back into the presence of God? How do you go into Zion? You have to get your name written on this leaf or on the book. And so here we have on the right, or you're right, yeah. On the right is one of the most ancient temples. It's the Temple of Saqqara. It's not a temple, it's a pyramid of Saqqara. And in the forefront was for a sacred ceremony that was done on the new year. So this sacred ceremony on the new year, there's a lot to it, and I'll go into it another time, but it's the Hepsed festival. And that festival, I tracked it for years because I wanted to know what it was. And actually right there, I got a lot of information. But it has to do with the woman And she would tell the priest, yes, this man, my husband, is pure, and therefore he can become the Pharaoh. So this kingship, and we have to remember, we think of kingship as the guy on the top that rules everyone below. But the way Isaiah saw kings and queens were servant kings and queens, doing the will of God for the people so that the people can rise up. It's really to give you more liberty, because as you follow those laws, God's laws, you have more things, right? If you don't lie, cheat, steal, all the corruption, more blessings come to you, and you get better and closer to God. So God's laws were put in place to help elevate humanity, not to, push down and rule over. So the first dynasty shows up in Saqqara. And the story of the first dynasty is, it probably happened before 3000 BC, but what they have put it to is 3000 BC. So we'll go with that. And the name of the man was called Horus, and Horus is like Christ. So in the Egyptian theology, you can really say Horus/Christ, or his symbol, right? That's what they're forecasting to when he will come. But Narmar was a plate, and I'll show it to you. So a Horus Narmar means the man that was trying to become like Horus. So that's his thing. And he was married or with Neth, Nut. Those words, remember, they don't use vowels. But she was one of these pre-dynastic goddesses. So they don't have, but they know that she existed and that she came down, and Hotep means builder god. So Net Hotep was a builder god that came down, like those 8 that were these people that they had, these 4 couples, and they had all this information to share with humanity. So she's one of these type of builder gods, and she will correspond to Egyptus in the book of Abraham. So Egyptus was a daughter of Ham. His wife was named Egyptus, daughter named Egyptus, and this is where she takes and she establishes the first pharaoh in Egypt. Well, here's their vase. They don't have a story to go with it, but the vase shows the story. So you can see the water above the mountains. So it's a flood, right, above the mountains. And below it, you see flamingos with their feet in water. You don't see their feet, right? So they're in like a marsh. And then you see boats coming in. On the front of the boats are the palm fronds. Palm fronds, just like with Christ going in, have a symbolism of resurrection or renewal. Then in the middle, you'll see the true throne chairs, male and female, 2 thrones. And on the back of the throne chair, you can see a double arrow. And on the left, that is one of the stelas for the queen, and that was one of the earliest queens, and it has the double arrows on it. And then what you see, it looks like an A. It actually goes in, probably our Alf is out that, but it's the plow. It's the beginning of civilization, cultivation, planting. And then on the back, if you look at the back of those little boats, you'll see a little bump thing, but that's a beehive.
I was going to say, that looks like a beehive.
It's a beehive because with civilization, you need bees. And so the bees are the big important thing, and that's, they say, Eve came out of the garden with the bees, because you don't get life without the bees, nor do you get humanity without the woman. So it's part of the woman's domain. So the earliest dynasty is very sophisticated with its symbols. The pharaoh, you'll see over here, he has the red bee crown, and he has on a symbolic kilt or apron. And then you'll see the double throne in the center with the palm fronds. This is a different ancient pre-dynastic vase, but it's telling the same story. It just doesn't have, the other parts on it. It might be on the other side. The palm fronds, the double arrows, and the red birds. Interesting thing with the red birds, the flamingos are pink, but later on we'll see that the flamingos and the phoenix and being reborn again, right, has to do with the red birds and the Ben bird that we will find later on too. So then you have Namar's tablet. This is the tablet, one of the most ancient that they have. It was in the Cairo Museum. But on the very top of it, you see 2 cows' heads. Cows' heads represented the Hathor, or the goddess of, now this would be in the time of Taurus. So I think it's a little hard to remember, but the precession of the equinox, when on the spring equinox, the star comes up, the sun comes up, behind it is the constellation in whose time frame you're in. So the time this was established was probably during the bull. And the goddess is the cow that comes to this earth and has her son, her child. And so later on, we will see at the time of Abraham, the precession of the equinox has changed, and then it has become, the next one is Aries, thank you very much. It's the ram. So then we'll see the ram, and we'll see the ram's horns, and that will change. But this one is the very old one, showing the two cows, and then in between is this symbolic temple. So to get back, you have to go through the temple. He's standing there, now he's wearing the white crown. The theory is that there's an upper and lower This is my own, but I want you to think of the red crown. It looks like a throne chair, doesn't it? You have the heavens and the earth come together. That's really what you're trying to do in Egypt. You're trying to go through, and us, ourselves, right? We're trying to become this connection. He's overpowering his enemy down there, and you have a falcon. The falcon continues to be from ancient Egyptian Horus. That's his symbol. It's our symbol today. It's a symbol of Christ. So the falcon represents this God. So the first government of Egypt is based after Adam and Noah. It's based after the ancients. So in the book of Abraham, which was received from the papyri that Joseph Smith got from the mummies, right? And that was actually in the Book of the Dead. Because at the time he got it, the Book of the Dead, I'll show it to you a little later, but this is where this information is coming from. So in verse 23, it says, the land of Egypt being first discovered by a woman who was, and you have to remember, Joseph Smith is trying to use terms that we'll understand in English, okay? So the land of Egypt being first discovered by a woman who was the daughter of Ham, the daughter of Egyptus, which in Chaldean signifies Egypt. Remember, Abraham was from Chaldea. That's kind of the northern area near Turkey. I'll show you a map here in a second. Which in Chaldean signifies Egypt, which signifies that which is forbidden. And I want you to think hidden or a mystery. This is the knowledge it's not for everyone. When this woman discovered the land, it was underwater, who afterwards settled her son in it. And then verse 25, now the first government of Egypt was established by Pharaoh, the eldest son of Egyptus, the daughter of Ham. Now it will be the mother that gives her crown, her bee crown, to the son. This happens all the way up when we see even Solomon has to be crowned by his mother, because it's the authority that comes through the mother to crown the king. So verse 26 says, the order established by the fathers in the first generation in the days of the first patriarchal reign, even in the reign of Adam, and also Noah, his father, who blessed him with the blessings of the earth and the blessing of wisdom. We'll see wisdom has a lot to connect with the woman. But the record of the fathers, right of priesthood, God preserved in mine own hand, a knowledge of creation, the planets and stars, as known by the fathers. This is Abraham, and this is Abraham speaking, but he's talking about the fathers as far as Noah and Adam. They knew all of these things, as known by the fathers. And I write upon a record for the benefit of my posterity. Now this is Egypt being written by Abraham while he's in Egypt. And this was found in the Dead Sea, the book of the Dead. So here we have Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, and I'm going to show you how eventually I think Moses fits in here. Now the word Pharaoh in Egyptian means great house. House means wife. The authority comes through the wife. In Genesis 54, it says, Joseph spake unto the house of Pharaoh, saying, speak in the ear of Pharaoh. He was not talking to a building, right? Speak, house, in the ear of the Pharaoh. No. And when Joshua 24:15, he says, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. So do you see the parallel between house and wife? Because she's the household. She holds the seed of the generations that will be the house. She is that it will be through that union of male and female that you will get a new kingdom, a new family, new generations. So anciently it was called a matriarchal patriarchy, meaning the matriarch and the patriarch are involved, the parents. That's why we can say Heavenly Father. It implies that he is a father, but it implies that he has a wife who is a mother. But somewhere along the line, she gets kicked out of the story. But there still is an inference, if you have a son of God, that there must have been a mother, because somehow he's just not a God 1 and God 2. There's a father God and there's a son God. Do you see the difference? So through the woman comes the bloodline, and she crowns the king, like I mentioned even with Solomon. The power behind the throne is kind of one of the terms. The red crown represents the throne, I showed it earlier, and with the bee or the life symbol coming out of that throne. So Eve and the beehive, these are symbols of life. The woman wears the throne, which is the symbol on her head. In the second dynasty, so this is the one I'm showing you, the very first dynasty, 3000 BC, this is the first dynasty. Second dynasty, they actually had a law allowing the woman to be the ruler. So obviously something had happened where the women were like, whoa, 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 wait a minute, don't forget us, because either one can rule. So here are the Egyptian headdresses of the throne of the royal wife. And you can see, it's in some of their ancient paintings, and symbolically she has the throne on her head, the throne on her head, even nursing the new son wearing the throne on her head. So now in Saqqara, that was a step pyramid that you saw. That's the oldest one, and it goes back to the first dynasty, 3000 BC. And it was built over even a more ancient civilization. And on the left, or on the right here, can you see this little man down here in the corner? Tiny. Look at that sarcophagus.
Wow.
They said, oh, that must have been for the bulls. They made coffins for the bulls. I don't know. This is black granite. This isn't even local to the area. The black and red granite are mined hundreds of miles away. And they've brought these down, and they're so deep in these shafts under the ground. One group, they went down and they walked around these, and they tried to pull one of these out to put it in a museum. It just got stuck. They could not physically pull it out. So the more modern, so I want you to kind of think there was something there possibly before the flood, and then great things came over it. And when they went back and they reestablished, they built over those ancient megalithic sites because there's power. There's actually power because they're on the 30th parallel. We'll go into that maybe another time, but the location where they are is very important. Important for how you get off of this earth. So here's Saqqara. It's built over the more ancient ruins. And so this temple is what we climb down into. So you go down steps, and then you get down in a hunch, and you crawl under like a birth canal. And you climb under, and you pop into that outer room right there. This room that's the pyramid text. Those writings on that entire wall, all the way around it, are these words. They're the words of things and it's written like a play. The man says something, and then the God says something, and then the person leading him says something. So it's done like a play. And at first they have it, the first recorded we have is the temple. On the ceiling, you can see the stars in the heavens. So those are the stars. And if I were to turn around, there is a black, not this big, but there's a black granite sarcophagus where the mummy would be put. Now, it's very interesting that if you take a light, the walls are made out of alabaster. And so, if I have a light, it would be fun. I don't know where my phone is. Can
I
you
think you bumped it. Here,
I
let me-
did.
Sorry, do it again.
Okay, now I won't bump it.
Can you lift it up to the camera so we can see it as well?
Yeah.
Thank-
Can you see how light literally goes through the alabaster? Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
So light can pass through. Alabaster is not local to this area either. So they brought in the alabaster stone. While we were going there, I stayed down to listen because it was quite crowded in this area. And on the wall to the black sarcophagus, he turned off the light and he showed us the wall. And to our eye in the light, it just looked flat like that. But when he turned off the light and put a flashlight next to it, it's actually carved. And it was the image of the back of the Pharaoh carved in relief going through the wall.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Is that amazing? So they literally carved his back and his arm, and he's going through the wall. So that's the concept, is that through using these words and these sayings and these prayers, that he would have the ability to rejoin God, right? And pass through these gates.
But the interesting thing, Robin, I thought too, is it wasn't to the naked eye.
You couldn't see it.
Until you turn the light off and he's shown the light on it. You
Yeah.
could see it.
Yeah.
Even if you didn't have a light on and you turned the lights off, you still wouldn't see
You
it.
could not
You
see
had
it.
to have the components of the darkness and the light in order to see the image.
Isn't that remarkable?
Well, it's
Yeah.
so symbolic too.
It's so symbolic, and we were blown away. And this is down underground through a hole that they will bury. And so it wasn't for populations to appreciate somebody's sculpture ability, right? It was specifically for, and how expensive and at what time it would take to make this kind of temple. And anyway,
So only rich people or pharaohs can be saved, and the poor population doesn't have it?
exactly. That's the problem. So what they did is then they couldn't get this. So then they started to write it on the coffin texts. So when I was in the Louvre, I kept coming across these sarcophaguses, and in the bottom of the sarcophagus was a woman with the wings, like the Isis, like the wife of Horus, right? And she has the 6 wings, like a seraphim. And on the inside of of that, they put the same stories on the inside of the coffin. So now a person that could afford that has it in their coffin. Isn't that great? Except, how many of us have those incredible coffins? We don't. So then what they got figured out is they could write it on papyrus. And it's still kind of expensive to write it on papyrus, but a lot less expensive than carving it on a tomb or on this. And then they rolled them up, and that becomes this, the Book of the Dead. They're the same stories, the same spells, the same prayers, which is what Joseph Smith found with the mummies in the coffins. That basically a grave robber had found some extra, but Joseph Smith recognized there's something really, really important about it. So we get it in our scriptures in part, because these tend to be about 20 feet long. You're writing all of that on a papyrus it's a lot, and there's a lot of repetition, but it's for this words and going back between angels and the person and their soul and passing through these gates.
Kay Godfrey is doing a whole new series called Beneath the Dirt. As an archaeologist with Abraham, he explains how that came to Joseph.
Well, this is really fascinating because at the time it was found, the peoples, the scholars that are finding it, were basically Christian or Jewish, maybe Muslim, and they would say all of this is pagan. So they didn't really pay attention to it. They didn't really care because it's just pagan crap. So we don't need to worry about it. Well, then after they can then learn and study at the time of Napoleon and they find the Rosetta Stone, and they start to understand how you can go from ancient Egyptian or ancient Greek to the Egyptian, then they're like, oh, now we can interpret it. Now we can put it in writing, but it's still pagan stuff. And now they've become agnostic or atheist, and again, they don't really care. So you have 200 years where nobody cares. So what you find with the Egyptologists is they'll tell you what's there, but not why it's there. It's like knowledge without the wisdom. For what purpose is it? It's to go through these doors, these gates, symbolically closed, but like that body going through the wall, his soul is going up and up and up through the veils of heaven back into the presence of God. So as the temple set it up, then the tombs, right? Even our cemeteries today, we bury our feet to the east, to the rising sun. And I always thought, oh, it's for the coming of the Lord. It is, but it also goes back to the north, south, east, west. They are totally aligned, not just some random hole they dug. And here, this is King Tut's tomb. Here's Tut. There's the god of the heavens with the white, and his a priest. There's the wife, and they're talking to the gods. Here, these monkeys, these baboons, we'll see, but the baboons are keepers of wisdom, and they represent Thoth or Enoch. Symbolism there, I don't know the whole story, but they keep showing up as a Thoth type symbolism. Here you can see he's represented as green, meaning he's a dead guy. And you see the little guy in front of him, it's probably his tomb. He's coming before him. He needs to pass through the eye, which has a hand. And the eye, remember, represents the woman, the eye of Horus, the eye of Re. And the falcon being, again, this Christ type falcon. He's a son of God. He helps us. He helps us transition back to the presence of the Father. So he's always, in fact, let me make sure I read this right. The sacred embrace, there's a sacred embrace there, is with individuals as she or he gives the correct answers. The pyramid text or the Book of the Dead has the words that need to be said along the path.
What, was there a sacred embrace in that picture?
Over here, you can see he's starting to embrace
Okay.
the God.
Okay.
Yeah, and there are many sacred embraces that we will see with different lower, and then the father, the wife, the mother. So we would see that over there also.
And the green face goes into the green man in England.
Yes.
And with the vine
Yes.
around his face.
Yeah, it's real life. So the green man from England, perfect. You can see how now we're getting down to the root. We have been digging at all the parts, and now the puzzle's coming back together in Egypt. But had we not gone on our little journey following all of these escapades, right, we wouldn't have known the puzzle pieces that are going to fit together so beautifully back together. So in temples, the goal was to become as Horus, the son of God. He is the example, the way. Horus in ancient Egypt was also called the way. It was one of his names. So you can see the parallel. The way of the kings and queens, servant kings and queens. So here we have the heavenly couple, and he's representing, the heavenly couple with the sun above his head. She's represented, she has the bird above her head. She's the kite, which is the female falcon, or a smaller falcon, right? She's kind of the little falcon. And then they have their authority. Here he is having the head. He's wearing, now I become like a son of God, with my wife, she has her bird, and the bird representing the vulture which takes from death and brings to life. So in one way, she not only brings life, and you can see these robes, these like temple robes that they're wearing, and then she has the two feathers on her hat, the two feathers representing truth and light. Truth and light. So it's that moral judgment, that the ones that our remnant is the statue, or what is she? Not Liberty, where she weighs the scales.
For justice.
Justice, Lady Justice, right? It's this moral, there are laws, but the laws are really to become closer to God, but they're also to protect the family, because without moral actions, you don't protect the wives and the children. This is the big, important part of civilization. Without the protection of the family, you have no civilization. So that's part of hers. And then he's wearing both crowns, not only the red with the thing above it, you know, the little tongue of the bee, and also this white crown, which on it, it has feathers. It's almost like he's ascended. He's going to become like a bird. Like he can ascend to the heavens, right? So that's that one. So in this book that has the English translation from the ancient papyri about a man named Annie. And you said, well, how can these people, I couldn't afford a tomb, and then maybe I couldn't afford this fancy sarcophagus. Well, Annie was a scribe, and so he probably got it, maybe he helped make it, or his friends did it, but it's like a 20 long roll. Joseph Smith said the one that he had, he could roll it across the room, and it was both red and black. It had both colors of ink on it. The remnant that we have only has the black, and it's only pieces of an old Book of the Dead. But here you can see on the top, these are other gods and goddesses, or sons and daughters of God, let's call them that, right? That they are sitting in judgment, and they're watching as Annie and his wife, so there's the wife standing behind him, and then Annie, he's humbled over, right? He's doing a certain symbol with his hand across his chest. They're wearing temple robes, special clothing, white linen, and they're coming in, and now you can see little Annie's soul. He's his little bird. He's standing on the temple or a tomb, but it might be his tomb, right? Because his soul is now going to be measured in the balances, like Lady Justice, measured against his heart. That's a little container for his heart, against the feather, truth and light. And is his heart pure? Has he purified his heart? And over here is Toth, our friend Enoch again, writing it down on a thing. Okay, looks a little heavy, Annie. You got a problem. Or looks like it's in balance, Annie. You're going to be able to continue on. So if you don't, you have a little Enoch symbol. There's a baboon on top, which represents the truth, and then the feather on this side. Here's this creature, which is a combination creature of kind of like a hippopotamus, alligator, a lion, but he represents this animal that if you aren't good, he's going to gobble you up. He's like the you know, you're going to the pit. You're going down, Annie. So that's what that one is. Now these are the words of the text that I copied out of the book, as the heart is being weighed in the balances against the weight of the feather, which represents the truth and light. O my heart, which I had from my mother. O my heart, which I had from my mother. O my heart of my different ages, do not stand up as a witness against me. Do not be opposed to me in the tribunal. Do not be hostile to me in the presence of the keeper of the balance. For you are my ka, you're my soul, you're my heart, my soul, which was in my body, the protector who made my members hale. Go forth to the happy place whereto we speed. Do not make my name stink to the entourage, the sons, right? The sons and daughters of God, to the entourage who make men. Do not tell lies about me in the presence of the God. It is indeed well that you should hear. Thus say Toth, which is Enoch, judge of truth, to the great Ennead, that group of the gods, those couples, the Ennead, which is in the presence of Osiris, which is Christ. Hear this word of, and I just gave you an example because it keeps going on. But do you see how these words, they weren't just prayers or songs. He's pleading that I'm pure. Please let me come through. And how important was it for them to live a life? Because they believe this. This is truth. So this Horus/Christ leads the pure-hearted Annie back into the presence of the Father. Before the Father are other sons who were reborn on the lotus. So you see Annie being led by the Christ-type figure. He's sitting here, he's sacrificing, and he has this little thing on his head. That is an anointing. It's oil. He's an anointed man. He's an anointed man, and he's offering these foods. Tammy asked me, what's with the foods, Robin? Why is there food everywhere in these places? Well, it wasn't just so that they would have food in the hereafter. It's food the way we use food at a Passover. You have the bitter herbs. You have the onions. You have, everything means something. So his whole life, in symbolically, before, this is representing this God in heaven with the two women behind him. These are the two sisters, one being Isis and one Nesbet. They are daughters of the Son of God. And they stand with him. And here you can see above, you have the serpents, which represented this enlightened mind, enlightenment was put on the head of the Pharaoh. But they're next to this top part, which is the Horus, which is the Son. So he's always trying to bring you back to the Father. And that's what's represented there. So near the end of the progression, Annie has become as a son of God. Now here's the king, and then right there in front of him are the four sons. We see that a lot of times as the four seraphim around the throne of God. Here they're representing, they've been reborn. They're anew, they're purified. And now Annie gets the treat. He becomes one of those little sons of God. That's his hope. That's what he's writing in his paper. Please, let me see the waters below, and the lotus comes out of the chaos and the dirt. This representing waters over there.
And where's that on the actual papyrus with Annie's head?
It is in the, we didn't see it in ours, but it is in here, in the Book of the Dead. Annie's head shows up. Yeah, that's where I got the picture of it.
That's cool.
Okay, so I want you to look at the Book of Abraham again, the facsimile. Remember, you were saying, but it looks so rudimentary. It seems so simple. But if you understand what each one of these symbols mean, you would have the man starting on his journey over here. He has his journey and he has his authority. His two feathers on his head go up into the heavens. They're outside the ring of this. And then he goes on his journey, and he's in the ship. Then he goes down to the bottom, and that's why I was telling you there's some secrets down there in the bottom. So I flipped it upside down so that you can see. After he's done, this bird, which represents the Spirit of the Lord, or the Lord, is teaching him some things, some symbols that are key words. One being that eye, remember, represents the woman, the eye of Horus. And here her face is literally the eye. She doesn't have two dots of eyes. She is the Egyptian eye. And she's holding her bouquet, or her fruit, or her ability to create above the loins of the cow, the goddess that came down to bear the sons of God. So here she is representing that, and then you see the four sons of Horus also represented there. There's some additional stuff, but this is very parallel to, you see the four sons, and they have different headdresses on, they represent different things, but that's the goal, is to become as a son of God, or as a daughter of God. Right? They had both. So I just wanted you to see that. And then you go back into the eye, to the center part, and you see the two faces of God, the Elohim, the plurality, probably the male and female. And then you have the two little baboons, enlightened baboons. Those represented Thoth or Enoch. They were helpers to help humanity raise up so that we can return back into the presence of God.
One question
Yes.
on the circle, the last slide.
Yeah.
Is there a reason they're upside down as to why you flipped it up so you could see it?
Yeah.
It's not as above, so below, but below on earth or upside down. That's why the world's a little upside down.
Yeah, could be that. They are just showing you this. They've said it should probably almost be a spherical, but they're representing it to you as a flat thing. And this were their actual hypocephali that were in the Cairo Museum, which Nibley looked at and compared to, that are a little bit different, but they're very similar. And they were the cliff notes to be under the cephalus, the head, the hypocephalus of the priest, who would be, he has his cliff notes to help the soul return back into the presence of God, because everything on there means something, right? So it's just your cliff notes. As simple as a cross is to Christ in crucifixion and resurrection, these symbols are to them. They hold tons of meaning behind them. So here we go back, and it's returning to the presence of God the Father, Amun-Ra, or Amun-Re, and God the Mother, Hathor. So here you can see the two in the symbol of the temple, right? The two represent this holy couple with power and authority to reign, those kings and queens. So here in chapter, for not restraining any soul in the God's domain, you who are on high, who are worshipped, whose power is great, a ram greatly majestic. Now Annie must have written at the time when the equinox has shifted from the bull to Aries, the ram, because now the god is represented as a ram. So the ram, greatly majestic, the dread of whom is put into the gods, the lower g, gods, when you appear on your great throne. You shall make a way for me and my soul, my spirit and my shade, his body. For I am equipped. I've done everything you asked. I am a worthy spirit. Make a way for me to the place where Re and Hathor are. Make a way for me to this presence of Elohim. Okay, that's part one. There's way more. Lots of questions, of course. But we don't have time for lots of questions right now. So I'm just going to take you to part two, the bloodline of Joseph. So we had Abraham, and we had the book of Abraham, and we have Abraham going into Egypt. What you need to understand is around the Mediterranean, that group of people tend to be more fair-skinned. When you get into Africa, we think of Africa as one giant continent, and that it is all a mix. But actually, the Egyptians were fairer-skinned than the native Africans. Below the Sahara, the sub-Sahara, you definitely have more black-skinned people. Just to tell you that. The thought that Abraham, there's an mentioned that's on the Euphrates, but there's also an near Urfa, where we've heard more about Urfa because of the wars and things that we've been over in that area. But they think that that and I'll show you on the thing, is where we know that where Noah is Mount Ararat up in Turkey. They think that's where he landed. And then you would have people coming with that great knowledge down into Mesopotamia and down, and even we know that at the time of Abraham, his father had apostatized, and he goes down and over into Egypt. Well, it's probably a cousin or a relative that would have been Egyptus, right, who established Egypt. They're of the same family, just going to let you know. And Abraham, they're very wealthy and powerful. And if you look back into the actual history of the area, there's a lot of wars and stuff going on. And so I would probably get into that in the next area to show you really how our biblical knowledge is this esoteric, soft, and there's just some couple cows, and you get the spotted cows, and I get the solid cows, and we'll just move on. But it's way bigger than that. We've just gotten it simplified into a story form that we can hold in our mind, and so we could learn. But you have Abraham coming down, his father has apostatized, and meeting with the Pharaoh of Egypt. Now, before they probably meet, there was a group that had moved into Egypt called the Hyksos. And they had chariots and they had swords, and it was a great battle. And they kind of broke up. First through 6th dynasty, I mean, they're really solid. But there's an area in there that they become this, they aren't the same, I'll just say. And they are called the shepherd kings, and people want to say, oh, it must have been Abraham the shepherd. I don't think so, because they didn't really like him. There's animosity. And finally, a great king will raise up, and he will push them out. I think it might be Abraham's group coming down to help him, because they reestablished. Remember, he had lost a lot of knowledge, and Abraham's going to share with him some knowledge of the stars. They obviously had that knowledge early on, or you wouldn't have the great buildings and the alignments and all the stuff they know. So there's some knowledge being shared. And when you realize that the bloodline is so important that Pharaoh's just not going to say, hey, shepherd over there, can I have your wife to be my wife? Never happen in a billion years. That wife has to have something in her, because The power came through the woman. So she's incredibly important. Remember, Sarai meant princess. So there's something we don't know about the rest of the story, but they're not itinerant farmers. That's not what they are. So I'm just going to give you the basic bloodline right here. So we have Terah and we have Abraham. Let's just start there. Abram, whose name changes to Abraham. Sarai, who changes to Sarah. Then they go down, they have Isaac. Isaac marries Rebekah. And she's of a similar bloodline. Remember, they won't let her marry in the Canaanite area. She has to go to get a cousin or somebody that's relative to marry. Then Isaac and Rebekah, they have Jacob. And Jacob, he's the one that has the dream, and the Lord changes his name to Israel. So here we have two types where we see Abram was changed to Abraham, which adds the ha, the ah, the ah, the life. And Sarai, princess, becomes Sarah. Their names, when the Lord changes them, he calls Abraham will be father of nations. Sarah will become mother of nations. Big blessing, huge blessing. Then we get down to Jacob, and Jacob has the two sisters, Leah and Rachel, and their handmaidens, right? And so we can see that Jacob's favored wife was Rachel. That's who he wanted to marry. But then she ends up having later in life. She doesn't, Leah's popping out the boys. Boom, boom, boom. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, all these guys. She's got them all. And Dinah. But over with Rachel, she just has the two sons, Joseph and Benjamin. And Jacob so loves Joseph that he gives him the coat of many colors. And that's what pisses off, because it's a marker. It's a sacred clothing. He's giving him a sacred clothing. That clothing means something to those other boys, and they don't like it. So they sell him off, and away he goes to Egypt. Now I just want you to look here, and you can see this is around the Mediterranean, and down on the bottom would be the Libyan desert and Goshen, and that's Egypt. There's a dot there, and it says On. On means light. And later on, so in that language, On was light. But later on, the Egyptians come in, the Greeks, and the Greeks name it Heliopolis. So it turns out that On is a temple, and Joseph will be sold over into Egypt, and that he will marry the daughter of the priest of On, or the priest of Heliopolis. She's not only the daughter, she kind of represents the virgin. She would be parallel to Virgin Mary at a great cathedral, right? You're honoring her, Virgin Mary, and we're like, why do they do that? Well, it actually has very ancient roots, because there's something about the woman and the tree of life, and so his daughter is the representative of that, and her name is Asenath. Asenath is, remember at the very beginning I said there were two of these builder gods. One was Nemer, Horus Nemer, and the other one was Neth-Hotep, the builder god, Neth. So Aseneth, or Aseneth, is a follower of Neth, the goddess. And so she understands the teaching of Neth. But by the time Joseph gets over there, there's been, all of these guys are following the Book of the Dead. They all want to become sons of God. So every pharaoh wants to be called a son of God, and once they get that nomer, then they get a sculpture, and they get a little votive candle, and it's like saints, right? We all want to be saints. And so in the Catholic Church, they light candles to them. Well, that's what happened to them. They had so many. So when Joseph comes in, Asenath recognizes him, and she's like, oh my gosh, I thought you were like some shepherd dude that had an adulterous relationship. Oh no, you are second. He doesn't want to have anything to do with her, and then he gives her a blessing. Still believes in the sons of God, the Lord of Lords, the King of Kings, right? But she's simplified it all down to understanding what Joseph understands. And she's visited by heavenly angelic being, and everything changes. That's who he marries. She's a very, very important person, but she just gets a couple mentions in our Bible. Anyway, so this is kind of how the world looked back there. Mesopotamia, Babylon, Haran, and then up at the top you'll see another red dot, and it says Ur up near Turkey, and this Ur, there's another Ur down over here near Babylon. They have question marks because we used to think it was down low. Now we're thinking, I think Abraham was up in this Ur area near Turkey. Okay, so just to give you a little heads up on that one.
And that's where the ark,
We're closer to Turkey, right? So then I just want you to also put in your mind kind of where we are with Egypt. And now on this map, it has On, over Egypt, On, and now with brackets, Heliopolis. Because the Greeks renamed it Heliopolis. So in our scriptures, there's a lot of Heliopolis because we're coming from the Greek. So, and you see up at the top, Ramses. So this is the time. Ramses was at the time of Moses' departure. And then you can see him wandering, and you can see the land of Canaan. And there's another one right at the top. It says Ai, number 17. Ai, that's the land of Ai. But it's in the land of Ephraim. And I'll show you why that becomes a clue, an amazing clue. And by the end of this, you're going to be scratching your head and saying, I don't know about that, but just give me one more time to talk to you. This is just laying a foundation for you, okay? All right, so here's the timeline of Joseph. His grandparents, Abraham and Sarah, received everlasting covenant, a celestial covenant, that they would have seed as the stars and the sands of the sea. And he will be a father of nations, and Sarah will be a mother of nations. That's in Genesis 17. Now the son Isaac marries Rebekah, and she's given the blessing that she will be blessed to be a mother of thousands of millions. How's that blessing? And then Jacob has his name changed to Israel, and he marries Rachel. And they have Joseph, who Jacob gives the coat, the colorful coat. And Joseph is then sold into Egypt, and he becomes the second to Pharaoh and rides in the second chariot. Now, chariots were not introduced into Egypt until after the Hyksos, that conquering group that came in, that eventually get kicked out, but they bring the chariot. So we think they're up near Persia, and they have come over and conquered. So Joseph lived during the 18th dynasty in Egypt. You can look up Egypt in your Bible dictionary, and you will see a lot of this information. People try and figure out where's Moses fit. Maybe Abraham was 2000 BC or 25,000 BC, but how did he fit to Joseph, who was riding a chariot? Because they weren't, anyway, there's a problem there. So the golden age of Egypt, this is the golden age of Egypt, is when Joseph rules. And they rule from Syria, which is way up, you saw on the map, to Mesopotamia, and all the way down through Libya in Africa. So this is kind of like the Roman Empire, except it's Egyptian, right? This huge, massive ruling area. So Joseph marries a Seneth of the first temple of On, or Heliopolis. And we know that she had two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, who are adopted in by their grandfather, Jacob. And they're given great blessings and adopted in. But then Joseph says to him, if you have any other issue, they will still be under this blessing, Joseph. So it might be that they knew there would be other children. But we don't know about that because we're just in the Bible. So I want to show you the 18th dynasty is from the 1550s to 1075 BC. Solomon's temple, just as a guidepost, is around 975 BC, or closely 1000 BC. So everything had to happen prior to 1000 BC for Solomon's temple to begin, right? So this Ahmose, I want you to look at the name, Ahmose, right? He's the one that kicks out the beasts, kicks out this Hyksos group, kicks them out, and he reunites Egypt. So somewhere in here is probably maybe the end of the Hyksos, but I think Abraham would be probably talking to the guy that's going to be fixing things, not the invaders that were there for 200 to 500 years. So we have Ahmose, and then we have Amen, which is like Amen God, or Amen, that's we say at the end of every prayer. Amen Hotep, builder God, number one. Then there's Tut meaning Enoch, Mose, son of Enoch. One, Tutmosis, two. And then Tutmosis II has Tutmosis III, but he's too little. So his sister, Hatshepsut, I think is how they say it. She rules and is the first known, I mean, there were other female pharaohs, but this we know, and she has a big temple in the Valley of the Kings. The Valley of the Kings is really the Valley of the 18th dynasty. And so Hatshepsut, she rules for her nephew, Tutmosis IV. And Tutmosis IV is kind of a little pill, because then he scratches out his mom's name, or his aunt's name, and he puts himself in front of it. Right? But then he has Amenhotep II and Tutmosis IV. I think it will be Tutmosis IV is who Joseph serves. So Joseph comes in, and he's there for quite a period of time, from age probably 14 until age 30. At age 30, we're given his age when he marries a Seneth, and that he's gathering at that point. So he's been there for 15 years, and he's been gathering now at the very end. At age 30, he's now, kind of second to Pharaoh, riding the second chariot, having the ring, and all the things for this Pharaoh. And then, Joseph marries a Seneth and Ephraim and Manasseh. Okay, let's keep going. Now Jacob, whose name changed to Israel, he gives a blessing to Ephraim and Manasseh. In Genesis 48, Joseph's father lays his right hand upon the head of Ephraim, and Joseph tries to put it on Manasseh's head. And Joseph says, I know, I understand. You can read the whole thing for yourself. But he says, but his father refused. He said, I know it. He also will be great. Manasseh will be great. But his younger brother, Ephraim, shall become greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations, plural. A multitude of nations. Chills down your back?
Yeah.
Okay, that is so important. That did not get scrubbed, and I'll show you why that becomes so important. Verse 22, he says, I have given to thee one portion above thy brethren, which I took out of the hands of the Amorites with my sword and bow. He's a warrior. Jacob is a warrior. And the Amorites, that kingdom existed at the time of Abraham. And Abraham was told he would be given the land of Canaan, but he said not yet, because the Amorites had not yet ripened in iniquity, but it will be his land. So the Amorites will go bad, and it turns out his son, Jacob, kicked their butts with his sword and his bow. Okay, sword and bow.
Jacob as in.
Jacob, this man.
Okay.
Powerful warriors. That's who's going on here. So Joseph is blessed with a blessing above his progenitors, meaning above those that came before him. So in Genesis 49:22, Joseph is a fruitful bough by a well, whose branches run over the wall. The archers shot at him. Remember, before it was the bow, now we have the archery. Well, I guess they're both archery. We have the archers. They shot at him, and they hated him. But his arms were made strong by the might of God of Jacob. So I just want to let you know, Joseph is a warrior. Whoa. He's more than second to the king. These are warring nations, and there's peace when they have agreements and everybody knows what's up. But just like the Roman Empire, there's fighting on the outlying areas, and there are things going on. So he says in 25, who shall bless thee with the blessings of heaven above and of the deep, blessings of the breast and of the womb. That's the blessing of the mother. Mother's blessing, only one that gets it. The breast and womb. The blessing of thy father, so the blessings of Jacob, had prevailed above the blessings of my progenitors, Abraham, Sarah, unto the utmost bounds of the everlasting hill. Jacob has been so blessed. But these blessings, shall be on your head, Joseph, above Abraham's blessing, above Jacob's blessing. They're going to be on the head of Joseph, on the crown of the head of him that was separated from his brethren, Joseph. Now compare this blessing. This blessing is when Jacob is dying. He's very old, and he's given the blessing. He's giving it to all 12 of the sons. He gives it to Reuben. Then he gives it to Levi and Simeon. This is the blessing. Same chapter, 49, but verse 5. This is to Simeon and Levi. He says, Simeon and Levi are brethren, instruments of cruelty in their habitation. Cursed be their anger, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Compare the blessings of Levi to the blessing of Jacob. Is there any comparison? Levi and Simeon, remember, down the wall, and meaning we had an agreement. You guys destroyed it. Why did you do that? So Jacob is the first president of the United States will put his hand on the blessing of Joseph.
This is in New York.
49:22. He knows something about this land, doesn't he? He knows something. He knows something about the blessing of Joseph. That's right there if you're at Wall Street, right down from the church, and that's the building where he stood. And we know that because it was a blessing used by the Masons, the first chapter of the Masons in New York. They recorded where he put his hand. And that Bible is still in there, and you can ask the people there, where was his hand when he sang the blessing? Some know, some don't, but I've been there a couple times, and one did and one didn't, so just let you know. Okay, now there is a book, there is an idea, and this is the book, and it's called Stranger in the Valley of the Kings, because there's a the Valley of the Kings is only for the kings. In fact, there's a Valley of the Queens. But the Valley for the Kings is for the pharaohs. And it was mostly the pharaohs of the 18th dynasty. Hatshepsut, the female pharaoh, does build her because she was a pharaoh. She builds her burial. They're like temple tombs, right? But there's a problem because four different giant coffins, right, with writings all over them. And the process of the mummification was so artfully done, like the Egyptian, Huya and Tuya. When we went to the Cairo Museum, this was what makes me cry, because I've studied it so much, and I love them so much, that when I walked in, all the kings, pharaohs, all the mummies had gone over to the new museum in Cairo, the latest, greatest, biggest, best. But there in the old Cairo Museum are only two mummies left, Tuya and Huya, because the Egyptians don't want to claim him. And we will see that the Jews don't want to claim him because, remember, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they leave Joseph. So I think we're looking at the tomb of Joseph and his wife, Asenath. those are left in limbo in that Cairo museum. Probably two of the greatest blessings to this world. Because through them comes our freedoms and agency and God's teachings. It's powerful. And wrapped in their tombs were the Book of the Dead. So they had that also wrapped in their tombs. Now this.
How would you answer the people that have asked on your other one about, that his bones were carried back to Israel?
I would say the winners of history write the history, but his bones have never been found in Egypt. I mean, in
Didn't you say there was father of a pharaoh?
let me show you
Okay.
why. And this is why, so this is the big question, and now I'm going to give you evidence of why I think it's different. Because everything that we have, right, would say, no, Moses left, and he was the son of what's his name? Anyway, I have it in here, I think. But this guy, he's Muslim. He wasn't really a scholar. He is now an Egyptian scholar. They quote him all the time. His name, Ahmed Osman. But he's like, how come if Abraham is the father to the Muslims and the Christians and the Jews, what happened? Like, shouldn't we all be following kind of the same thought process?
Yep.
How do we get so screwed up? So that started his research, which he also has the Quran and he has other sources that tell a little bit different story about Moses and Ishmael. And you know what I mean? There's a difference. So that's where he started. And he's like, what's with these two strangers in the Valley of the Kings? So Yuya is possibly Joseph and Tuya possibly Asenish. Here are the list of the titles on one of his 4 sarcophaguses. And his name, on it, he said, he was a father of God, meaning like he's a father of a pharaoh. He was the master of the horse. He was the deputy of the majesty. He was deputy of his majesty in the chariot. He was the bearer of the ring of the king. He was the seal bearer of the king of Lower Egypt. He was the favorite of the pharaoh. He was the confidant of the king. He was the mouth of the king. He was the prophet of God, Amun-Ra. He was known as the wise one. He whom the king has made his double.
Sounds just like Joseph.
Sounds a little familiar. Now Joseph would have served Tutmosis the fourth right there. So go down to 13 right here. Tutmosis the fourth right there. And then Amenhotep the third. Now Joseph, Yuya, and Tuya also had a daughter. Remember, their father said, I will bless Ephraim and Manasseh. But if you have any other issue, they will receive the blessing of these two. But obviously, they were going to have more children. It looks like they had a daughter. The daughter's name of Huya and Tuya was named Tai. So Yuya, Joseph, became a regent or acting for the young pharaoh whose name was Amenhotep III, and until he came of age to rule. So Amenhotep III married Tai, Joseph, daughter. So, and we will see this, there's some DNA evidence that even Tutmosis IV probably married Joseph's sister. We don't hear about the sister, but the DNA evidence show that Tutmosis IV had 2 royal wives and a third wife, a much younger wife. And that younger wife had a son, Amenhotep. Now, she's the younger wife. She's not one of the great royal wives. So how did her son become next pharaoh? There had to be some royal intrigue going on because there were 2 other wives, and somehow that son,
Maybe they didn't have
Amenhotep
sons.
the third, could be, in the story of Asenath and Joseph, there's a story where his older son gets killed in a battle, and the only son left that he has is a young son at the breast. So Tutmosis IV was an older guy, but he has a young wife with a young son who becomes Amenhotep III. That's the real story. That's the real Egyptian history. And we only have a remnant of that in the story of Joseph and Asenath. So we have a apocryphal, and we actually have a history that his 2 big wives did not have the son, and that somehow this younger wife has a son. But that younger wife is a DNA sister to the mummy Yuya. Which means, like the Pharaoh before that wanted to marry the beautiful Sarah, there's something in that bloodline that must be good, because that Pharaoh marries the daughter of Joseph. And when we know Joseph is not a royal, he is not a Pharaoh. He does not come from the previous pharaonic line. That's why he's left in the Cairo Museum, if that's him, right? He's left because he's not. But now it looks like his sister married the Pharaoh whose baby he now becomes the regent for. It's his nephew. And now he's acting, this kid's only like 2, 6, I don't know how old, but he's not old enough. You can't be Pharaoh until you're about 30. Like, they don't want you to be a Pharaoh. It's kind of like in the United States. This is like ruling Rome, right? It's a huge area. There's no way you would have the ability to do this. So he would rule with him, and then their daughter, who's little at the same time, they marry. So now we have a situation where we have Amenhotep III marries the daughter, and we know it's the daughter, and of Yuya and Tuya. If they are Joseph and Asenath, it means they married the sister of Ephraim and Manasseh. Okay? It's a little complicated there, but I'll show you a little chart here in a second. So Amenhotep III, when he grows up, he's called Amenhotep the Magnificent, because he builds many of the temples that we saw. Remember the temple of Luxor? And I was walking through it, and Amy Joy comes up next to me, and she's like, Robin, I have a feeling like Moses is here. And I'm like, yeah, I think so. Because it turns out that the bloodline, that great blessing, will go through this son and their daughter down to the generations that include Moses. And that's why this whole story, everybody's like, what the heck? We're in Old Testament and it's all. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but look at the evidence. Okay, and that's what I'm trying to show you here. So this unusual marriage of a pharaoh to a non-royal, which would have been Tai, is unheard of, like I told you before. No, because the bloodline comes through the woman. Just like the Jews today. If you're a Jewish woman and you have a child, that child's Jewish. But if you're a Jewish man and you marry a Gentile woman, that baby is not Jewish. Interesting, huh? It comes through the mother. So here we have a cuneiform tablet, and there were hundreds, if not thousands of these. And they are a big announcement that they're sending out to the Euphrates and to Persia and to Libya. They send them everywhere. They found them. And it's announcing that Amenhotep III is going to be marrying Yuya, Tai, the daughter of Tuya and Yuya. What? He's marrying a non-royal? Shouldn't everybody be up in arms? Because what the heck is going on? This is a picture of him. And when you go into the Cairo Museum, this is a colossus. Right there, you just walk right into it. Boom, there it is. That's him, that's her, and they send out these everywhere. Now, you would think everybody would be in uproar, but not if Joseph had been acting as his regent and ruling for 20 years as he grew up. No, I think his daughter would be acceptable, right? He's proven himself. He fed the people. They were starving. He is known and renowned and loved. So there's a book, and it's called The Complete Royal Families of Ancient Egypt. And in it, it shows the lineages of them. And now more modernly, like when he wrote this, they didn't have the DNA. Now they have more of the DNA that's showing who's connected to whom. So so the Egyptologists know more than they knew in 1800s. They know who is related to whom. They even have the DNA evidence that ties Yuya and Tuya as the father of Tai. 100%. They know that she's the daughter of those two parents. And they are the maternal grandparents of Amenhotep IV. So Amenhotep IV changes his name to Akhenaten. Akhenaten he's the rogue pharaoh. He tries to change the religion. And he changes his name from Amenhotep IV to Akhenaten, and he tries to go back to the teachings of Enoch and the 4 couples that came down. He shows the balance of the woman, the male and the female in balance. This picture on the front is of his wife holding their daughters. The daughters are held. They're shown. They're talked about. Let me tell you, I did not want this story to be true because he's a funny looking dude. And I don't like him. I didn't. Now, if this is true, that people wanted to say, even Sigmund Freud, so where else in the history of Egypt is there anybody else that changes the religion? Crickets. Just isn't. So, but he did not change it to be, he said to the Aten. So he changed his name to Aken, which is Ankh, is life, of Aten. Aten is the son of God. Can we see how anciently they believed Lord of Lords, King of Kings, but then the changes, and then it's just the Son of God.
The sundial.
Yeah.
With 2 horns.
Yeah, the Son then becomes now morphed, and is, instead of worrying about these hands, that's a sun above him. Here's the book, if you can see it, the sun above him. That the hands coming down are female hands. They're the hands of God, the handmaidens. So the sun has...
Somebody
needs to mute there, guys. I can't see who it is, but it's bad.
Well, that's where the divine right of kings came from in Europe as well, was the ancient.
So if anyone on the Zoom could please... They are not listening. It sounds like they're ice skating. I don't know what to do there.
We're doing dishes or something.
Something. Okay, so, but he wants to take it back to the couples, right? The concept of these holy couples. And Noah, the teachings of Noah, Enoch, and the sons of God. So he changes the religion and he honors his wife and his children. And he names his son Tut Ankh Aten, Aten.
Tutankhamun.
No, we know him as Tut Ankh Amen. But his name originally was Tut Ankh Aten. But what happened is he can't make the churches change, right? Have you noticed that? Luther tried to change the Catholic Church, couldn't change it, so he ends up with all these additional breakoffs. Well, what happens, they're also having wars and different things are going on. It's a pretty good time, and he thinks, now his father, Amenhotep III, started these changes. Because if Asenath had to make the changes, certainly her son-in-law, who she raises as, a half son with her daughter, the daughter had been taught this, the son had been taught this, and they would have known. So these changes start, but it's not until Akhenaten that he's strong enough. He knows he's going to be able to change it. And at age 39, see how parallel that is to Moses' 40? They say he dies, but they have no record of him anywhere. They have no tomb for him anywhere. They have no bones or body for him anywhere. They track everyone. They don't have him. He's gone. Well, in the story that we have of Moses, he's 40, right? And he gets kicked out of the kingdom, and he goes somewhere. And then he comes back later at age 80, and at age 80, the new Pharaoh doesn't know him. It's Ramses. It's Ramses II. So we know about Ramses in the Bible, but for some reason we just can't say Moses. It doesn't line up because the people writing the history is not lining up. But they have a lot of knowledge from the temples and everything. So they have a lot of good things. I'm not saying it's bad things. I'm just saying they want to go under Levi, that Moses was buried under a Levite and a Levite mother. And we read the blessing to Levi. That's not the blessing. It's the blessing to Ephraim, Manasseh, and Joseph. That's the line that is greatly blessed. That's the line, the Ephraimites, everything starts falling together. So in Genesis 50, it says, "And Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's house. And Joseph lived 110 years. And Joseph saw Ephraim's children to the 3rd generation. And Joseph said unto his brethren, I die. And God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land unto the land which he sware unto Abraham and to Isaac, and to Jacob, the land of Canaan. And Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and ye shall carry up my bones from thence. So that's where, like, okay, they must have done that, right? And Joseph died, being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin, I'd say 4 of them, in Egypt, and buried in the valley of the kings. Now, if Moses was coming back and trying to find Joseph, not only are those tombs buried and hidden,
They're
it'd
in
be
the Valley of the
very
Kings.
difficult. If
Mhm.
Moses is a little shepherd guy, how is he going to go in and break into the, and get out Joseph's bones? Who's keeping them? So our texts say, there's another text that this guy said, and in their text, maybe it's Muslim, or I don't know where he got it, but it says Joseph died praising God. This mummy is unlike any other mummies in Egypt. All the other mummies have their hands crossed above their chest. Joseph's hands are up and under his chin, very carefully mummified to keep them perfect. You can see his fingernails. You can see the hair follicles. He is shaved recently, but as he died, some of the hairs came out, right? I think that even happens after death. Your beard grows a little bit.
It almost looks like Charlton Heston.
Doesn't he? Isn't he handsome? I know.
I know.
For 110 years old.
And they say he probably had fair hair. So here is the actual, this is out of the complete royal families, ancient. And this table, the 18th dynasty, has 3 tables. But I'm just going to start with Amenhotep III, the young son, right? From Tutmosis IV. Now, does it make sense? Moses, there's Tutmosis the first, Tutmosis the second, Tutmosis the third. And we get Moses. Do you think maybe we might be talking about the same guy?
Yep.
Just maybe. Well, Amenhotep, it looks like Tuya and Yuya. They know this as a fact. They had 2 sons. One son was named Anan, and one son was named Ai. Then they had a daughter named Tai. Tai marries Amenhotep III. And then you follow that black line down, Amenhotep III, and they have Amenhotep I. Well, he was really named Amenhotep IV after his father, but he changes his name to Akhenaten.
So that's Moses.
That's Moses. That's we think
So
Moses
it's not
is.
hundreds of years later.
No. That's why, how come he's got everybody's records? How would he have these records? Well, I think he had a lot of access to records. The temples were the keepers of the records. And he marries, check this out, Nefertiti, the one that you know is the most beautiful woman ever, Nefertiti. In fact, on the cover of the book, this is Nefertiti, right? She wears the beautiful crown. I mean, she's known as probably one of the most iconic women in the world. Well, they know, guess what? She's not of that pharaonic line. How the heck did she get to become the queen of a pharaoh? Well, let's go back. Where's her line go to? Dotted line, dot, 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 dot. Guess what? Look at, do you see A-Y? I? He has a daughter over there. In fact, he has 2 daughters. One's Nefertiti, and one is that Nut Non Adjet right there. She's important too. But right now, we'll just say, guess what? If it turns out Tai is the daughter, then you have Ephraim, then you have Manasseh. Manasseh becomes the temple. He works at the temple of Heliopolis. He's the high priest at the temple of Heliopolis. He knows all the ceremonies. He knows all the stuff. His brother is also a priest at the temple of Heliopolis, but he becomes the vizier or the religious helper to his nephew, Akhenaten. He's helping him. And he marries his daughter to him, Nefertiti, who's not of a pharaonic line. But remember, this family is supposed to be so beautiful. Sarah was so beautiful. Jacob was so beautiful. Nefertiti so beautiful.
Joseph was.
Joseph's so beautiful.
Mm-hmm. And
Something in this
Asenath.
line, they're very beautiful. Asenath has the classic, if you look at her, they say she has a classic Egyptian. She's quite small. She probably was only like 4'6", 4'2",
Oh,
little,
wow.
tiny. But her features, she's so beautiful. But she has the classic kind of more Egyptian features. Joseph, you saw that big jaw and different nose. Like he's not of that line anyway. So they marry, and there you get Akhenaten. Well, what happens is Akhenaten, right? He gets kicked out. But he and Nefertiti have a son. That son was named Tutankhaten, after the son of God. But what happens is when he gets kicked out, it looks like Nefertiti stayed with her son, who gets put in at a young age, probably 10. So in between, somebody rules, and they don't know who rules, but it's either their older daughter, who had kind of ruled with Akhenaten, or it's Nefertiti takes a pharaonic name, and she is the regent for her son.
Is that King Tut?
King Tut, yeah, that's King Tut. But he dies at age 19. And then they can't figure out, they look like they tried to bury him really quick, but he has all this glorious gold and amazing stuff at 19. Well, it probably was for his father, who was 40 at the time, or 30, right? He had been planning his funerary stuff for a long time. If Akhenaten, who leaves and is Moses, then they use his funerary stuff for his son. In fact, on the funerary, they know that they've scratched out some of the little scarabs with the name. Somebody was in there, and they put Akhenaten's name. Akhenaten's name, or King Tut's name, changes from Tutankhaten. They change it after he leaves to Amen, and they go back to the older religion. They just can't quite make the change, and they continue in that religion. But then, after King Tut, guess who rules next?
Ramses?
His 90-year-old uncle, great uncle, Uncle I, A-Y.
Oh.
Probably Ephraim ruled for a time. And then he had his daughter, his two sisters up there, Nefertiti, and she also had another sister, that Mut and Najud. She marries Horemheb. Horemheb becomes the ruler, the pharaoh, after I, but he's a military guy. But through the lineage of the wife, he takes authority. He's like over the military. He should not be a pharaoh. That's not the way you get to be pharaoh, is through the wife. So he has the wife of Ephraim, is what it looks like, and he rules. Then they put in, they don't have any children, they put in Ramses the first, and then you get, eventually Ramses the second. So it's not that they're doing terrible things, they're trying to maintain the religion as they know it. It's just Akhenaten was trying to adjust it back. He was trying to be the reformer and put it back into its purity, which Joseph reformed, which Abraham reformed, which Noah had to reform, which Enoch had to reform, which even Adam had to go back, right? He came down and messed up, and he had to go back and do what the Lord told him. Our Joseph is a reformer and tried to take us back to these teachings.
So Robin, at the parting of the Red Sea,
Yeah.
would that have been Ramses the second?
That was probably chasing him?
It was probably chasing?
Yeah.
Well,
Yep.
that kind of fits with what we saw with Ramses' personality.
Ramses is a jerk.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, he's a jerk. His wife is an angel, but he's a jerk. So Asenath, belonging to the goddess Neth, represents the idols she represented of idols before marriage to Joseph. Why did I put that? Asenath represented. Oh, sorry, I'm not reading my own word. Yeah, she had to repent of all those idols before she married Joseph, and their son became a priest of Heliopolis and a vizier to the pharaoh, Amen and I. Their daughter Tai marries Amenhotep III, and the religious changes begin. Their famous son Amenhotep IV would change his name to Akhenaten, and in Yuya's tomb, which we think is Joseph, there would be found a chariot, right? Because he's the guy of the chariots. And the only other tomb where they found the chariots is in King Tut. King Tut's tomb, there are chariots. And even while we're there, I brought up the point, but our Egyptian, she's like, oh no, they didn't have chariots then, and she tries. They really don't like Joseph. She said Joseph, he's the only person that enslaved anybody. There was no slavery until Joseph. She tries to prove to us. So they really don't like Joseph. They don't like the idea. I mean, this... Yeah, well, he's and they're Muslim. So this is not a good situation for them. But we see the Jews on the other side, they do the same thing. And here's one of the keepers. So in a chest found in Tuya's tomb has on it the Abrahamic covenant in symbols. It has health, power, God's authority for generations. And you can see it along the side. You see the Senet, the Dejed, and then the pillar of authority. That's it. I asked her when we were in Egypt to make me one. I wanted just the covenant. So this is my necklace, and it matches the covenant that we were told by the scholar, Bruce Porter, that this was the covenant, the Abrahamic covenant. So you can see the little pyramid, the Ankh, the Dejed pillar, and the authority, the rule for authority for generations. And it's all in the Shen symbol. The Shen is this eternal life, that loop that goes around with a little circle. Now I want to show you a really interesting thing. Oh, here's 3 Nephi 5-7. For behold, thou art the fruit of my loins, and I am a descendant of Joseph. This is Lehi speaking, who was carried captive into Egypt. And great were the covenants of the Lord which he made to Joseph. Wherefore Joseph truly saw our day, and he obtained a promise of the Lord, that out of the fruit of his loins the Lord God would raise up a righteous branch unto the house of Israel. Not the Messiah, but a branch which was to be broken off, nevertheless to be remembered in the covenants of the Lord, that the Messiah should be made manifest unto them in the latter days, in the spirit of power, unto bringing them out of darkness unto light, yea, out of hidden darkness, and out of captivity unto freedom. And in 3 Nephi it says, Yea, Joseph truly said, Thus saith the Lord unto me. So this is God talking to Joseph. A choice seer will I raise up out of the fruit of thy loins, and he shall be esteemed highly among the fruit of thy loins. And unto him will I give the commandment that he shall do a work for the fruit of thy loins. And his brethren, which shall be of great worth unto them, even to the bringing them to a knowledge of the covenants which I have made with their fathers. And he shall be great like unto Moses, whom I have said, I would raise up unto you. So is that of his blood? Might be. To deliver my people, O house of Israel. And Moses will I raise up to deliver thy people out of the hands of Egypt. Thus prophesied Joseph, I am sure that this thing, even as I am sure of the promises of Moses, for the Lord hath said unto me, I will preserve thy seed forever. Now remember, it said Joseph lived to see the 3rd generation of his sons. So that would be his son, Ephraim, or his daughter, Tai, and her son, that's Amenhotep. Then that's Akhenaten, and then his son, which would be King Tut. So there are generations, and when you start looking at the generations and how many generations they were there, it all starts matching up. Jacob 2:24-25 says, Behold, David and Solomon truly had many wives and concubines, which thing was an abomination before me, saith the Lord. Wherefore, thus saith the Lord, I have led this people forth out of the land of Jerusalem, he's talking to Lehi, by the power of mine arm, that I might raise up unto me a righteous branch from the fruit of the loins of Joseph. Now, the righteous branch of the Lord, in the Lord of promise. This is the righteous branch in the land of promise. Now think of promise as covenant. This covenant. What they were putting back together. Joseph only had one wife. Anyway, and have a knowledge of the covenant, the celestial covenant, as did the patriarchs and matriarchs of old. Now I want to show you this that I found that nobody could tell me about, and it would take years before I uncovered this puzzle. But at the Manti Temple, there was a book, and I didn't know what it was, but I was in the Manti Temple, and I was in the Holy of Holies, or up in the celestial room, and I was noticing the hardware. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many. Can anybody tell me what this hardware means? I didn't know anything about Egypt, anything. And they're like, oh, I don't know. There's a book up by the desk at the check-in. Maybe you can find something there. So sure enough, they had a book by the checkout. So I ran up and I got the book by the checkout. This is it. It's a 1988 Centennial Edition. And in it, it has some things about the hardware. So I went and I looked, I'm like, holy crap, that hardware is important. But listen to what it says. Here's artifact number 1. You can see the circle right there. It says, a circle is surrounded by a botanical motif. It's circled by small rings. One of these rings, instead of a simple circle or ring, is an ankh, or a crux, an anasta in different languages, but an ankh. The best known of all ancient symbols, as it stands for life. In the usual salutary title placed after the name of the initiate, so when you're going through the temple, that life symbol is placed after your name. So Janet would have an ankh of eternal life. Okay. And then it has a dajed, remember the little pillar? And a seneb. The ankh represents an umbilical cord, and 3 words mean health to the navel, marrow to the bones, and strength. Often it was in royal tombs. The last of the 3 was the Wa symbol, which is the scepter. Remember the scepter? So, which means, according to Gardner, power in the priesthood. In this drawing, the ankh sign is at the top of the circle. A quarter of a way around, next to the hole for the screw, is the Egyptian heteb symbol, meaning peace and salvation. On the opposite side of the circle from the ankh is the shen, the personal seal and sign for eternity, one everlasting round.
I bought that book just for that.
So did I.
Yeah.
But do you see how this covenant has been brought forward from Joseph?
Can you show us the ankh in the hardware? I can't see it.
Yeah, I can't see it in this picture.
How about on the screen? Look on the screen, it's bigger.
Well, I have the same picture here. That's what I'm looking at. I see this. So he's saying the power in the priesthood. In this drawing, the ankh sign is at the top of the circle. I have had trouble with this one, but what I did is I had to rotate it because the picture that he showed was not the same. So it is there, but I'm gonna have to look at my book because so I didn't know what those were. So you can see on my notes there, I'm like, oh, that means life. That's that symbol. The jed pillar, oh, I don't know what that means, but some know what that meant. But I guess it means some strength. But anyway, so that was put together. So for Zion to be created in this nation, we need to understand the blessing of the mother, the breast, and the womb. When couples understand the hidden teachings of the mysteries of God, then we start to put the whole picture back together. In 1 Corinthians 6, it says, howbeit we speak wisdom among them that are perfect, yet not the wisdom of this world, nor of the princes of this world that come to naught. But we speak of the wisdom of God in a mystery, even the hidden wisdom, which God ordained before the world, unto our glory. So the seed of Judah, our seed of Joseph, becomes a multitude of nations. Ephraim was the name of the lost 10 tribes collectively. Many nations of this earth have been influenced by the northern 10 tribes of Israel that dispersed up into Europe and beyond. The legacy of the righteous branch of Joseph: one wife, one husband, one covenant. The land of freedom, abundance, and seed as the sand and the stars. Sorry, but I'm like, I just don't think we're talking about the blessing of Levi. The end.
That was brilliant.
Yeah, my daughter's like, I don't think people put as much time into this as you do, Mom. Like, Sargon, the Akkadian king, is well known. It's a story 1,000 years before Moses.
With the bulrushes and the basket and
The
stuff.
problem with the bulrushes and the basket is there were a lot of crocodiles in Egypt. I don't think you're just floating down a basket full of meat in a, you know what I mean? So this was well known and would have been known to those that left in the exile. 16, it says, and these are the names of the sons of Levi. And Abram took him Jobed, his father's sister, to wife, and she bare him Aaron and Moses. the lineage of Levi. That was not the blessed lineage. Jethro was a Midianite. Midianites were from the 800 BC. Remember I told you Solomon's temple is 1000 BC? They don't really come into being until 800 BC. After the time of Moses was like 1300 BC, and we know that date's pretty close. After Solomon's temple, close to 1000 BC. So many people believe that the priests of Jerusalem rewrote Exodus while they themselves were in Babylonian captivity in 587 BC. So they would have known the story of the Akkadian king. It was a great myth. They also would have known the Midianites and that there's a bloodline there and they could put this together. But the Egyptians don't want to claim Joseph, and the Jews don't want to claim Joseph. So few care to solve the mystery.
That's okay, we want to claim him.
We want to claim him.
Yeah, we do.
We do. So anyway, and there's more there. So
For those of us who went to Egypt,
Yes.
honestly, you are brilliant, and I want to cry because I wouldn't know anything, because I didn't get the brain. I love history. I love.
you were there and you saw all those things.
I was there, I saw, but I have a headache right now because my brain is swirling around,
Well,
trying to take in all the information that you have researched
Yeah.
and studied, of which I am not going to do, and which I just give you a great tribute.
So I probably am going to start a website
Amazing.
just called
What
See
you've done.
Her
Yeah.
or See Her Clearly. And I will put on the things where we've really only been looking through the masculine eye of the world. But what I've really learned is that your DNA is, God's so perfect that maybe religions will tell you one thing or another. They can tell you a lot of things. But when it really comes down to it, a husband will love his wife. And the wife will love her husband. And in that love, do this. So what we find is it will be communism and Marxism that try and get rid of that connection and eliminate it. But the real power of freedom is when you protect civilization. You protect the wife and the children. You look at those that are anti-God, right? They just want to take your children and put them into public schools so they'd be good little minions to work for them and make money. They're not worried about their spiritual liberty and minds and souls. And that they can't take away from the woman. They can't take away from the man. So even though things I show you are like, oh, that's different than what I've been told in church and it's uncomfortable. But in reality, it should ring to your soul. It should bring peace and harmony because if it's truth, it should resonate. So I just leave that with you guys.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
You're welcome.
Yeah, is that Tammy?
Why